Because I think it takes like a second or two to show up here. I've been getting cut off lately on the Facebook Lives I've been doing for my desktop. So if you're watching this, oh, there it is. Okay. Welcome to the Flipping and Wholesaling Houses in New York show. I am Michael Pinter. I teach you how to start flipping and wholesaling houses in New York, or if you're already doing it, how to grow your business. Now, question is how to clear title on property. So first, let's talk about what title means. Title technically means ownership, right? If I own a property, I am on title. But what does title really mean in the way that what it has become to mean is title insurance. So every time you buy a property, you should get a title insurance on it, which means you use a title company. The title company researches the previous ownership, all kinds of liens, taxes, and they ensure that when you buy the property, that the seller is conveying clean title over to you. Okay, and you pay in New York several $1,000s for that more than several $1,000s usually for that privilege. But you want that to happen so that in general a Native American can't show up one day and say, "Hey, this is my grandfather's house. Get out of here." You're going to say, "I have a deed," and the title company, if they screwed up and they missed the fact that this Native American really does own the property, then after a unfortunately lengthy and arduous process, will pay you, will reimburse you for what you paid for the house. And really, title consists of usually, if there is a mortgage on it, two policies. There's a policy to cover the mortgage lender, and every mortgage lender requires title insurance. And then there's an owner's policy. So, for example, if you're buying a property for $400,000 and there's a $300,000 mortgage on it, there'll be two policies. There'll be a $300,000 mortgage to cover the lender, and then there'll be a $100,000 owner's policy covering the owner. So that's what title means. So what does a title company do? They go to the actual county and they research who is the owner of the property, right? Is the person you're in contract with the owner, or are they not, right? What happens a lot, is that there's multiple people on it. You're talking to a seller, and the seller forgot that he owns it with his sister, or they inherited a property and there's multiple siblings. The title company has to make sure that every person that has ownership rights to that house is conveying title to you, is involved in the contract and the closing, right? Otherwise, one of the siblings can come back and say, "Hey, you sold, a property that I own." And again, the title company's job is to make sure that there aren't going to be any claims. Now, title companies in the other 49 states really run the transaction. They do almost all the work. They cut the checks, the money's dispersed through them. The contract is basically given to them, and then they take the whole transaction from that process forward. In New York, it's dramatically different, right? Right. So you'll hear the term investor-friendly title company all the time, and what that means is a title company in the other 49 states that's used to working with investors and maybe is able to facilitate an investor transaction in an easier way because they understand what an investor is trying to do. There's no such thing as an investor-friendly title company in New York because the title company in New York really is a simple service provider that, in essence, does three things. The first thing they do is make sure all the liens are paid off at the closing, which is why if you're trying to do subject to deals in New York, and just to explain what a subject to deal is, a subject to deal is something that works in the other 49 states where a seller has a mortgage, just wants to get rid of the property and is willing to sell his property with that mortgage in place. So he's selling the property subject to the mortgage remaining in existence. And that happens a lot. In New York, it's almost impossible to happen because the title companies just will not convey title in New York with an existing lien in place. The second thing they do is make sure that taxes are paid. So taxes are a little more complicated in New York. There's usually multiple taxes. It's typical for 33 tax entities. There'll be a county tax, there'll be a school tax, there might be a village tax. And they make sure that everything is paid. And the third thing they do is insure, right, provide you an insurance policy that you're going to own this property. It's really, the title is really there only to benefit the buyer. It doesn't really help the seller at all. Sometimes it does. And we're going to talk about now what is clearing title. So when you say clear title, it usually means there's some kind of title issue, right? And in the other 49 states, very often the title issue falls on the seller to clear. So let me give you a few examples of things that might happen. There's a judgment that shows up from many years ago on the seller. Maybe it was paid off, but the judgment holder got paid and didn't file a satisfaction correctly. Sometimes they file a satisfaction, but there's a misspell, or it doesn't just match up. So what happens if there's a judgment? So a judgment is when a court orders you to pay something, and they place a judgment on you, that gets attached to any property you own. And then when you pay it, they're supposed to file a satisfaction of judgment, which makes the judgment disappear and doesn't show up further. Now, also a lien, it's similar to a lien. Like when you take a mortgage, which is called a deed of trust in other states. There's a note that says I owe $300,000 to Wells Fargo, and then there's a mortgage or a deed of trust, which is the lien on the property, which says, hey, if you don't follow the terms of that note, then we can foreclose on the property. So a judgment or a lien is something that's attached to the property, gets filed with the county, so that the judgment holder or the lien holder knows that this person can't sell that property without paying them off. And then when it's paid, a satisfaction of that lien or judgment is filed with the county. That makes it go away. So what happens sometimes is there are old judgments which really were paid. Sometimes they're tiny for $100, and sometimes they're massive. If you take a what's it called, a SBA loan, it could be for millions and millions of dollars. You're buying a business, they'll attach all the properties that all the owners own. 1 second, sorry. I'm buying property now. There's like a $2 million lien on the property. The property's not worth anywhere near that, and he's got to get a release from the SBA for that. Now, in other states, the seller is really responsible to bring that. Title company's not that interested. In the way it works in New York is very different. The title company does not run the transaction. Let's take a step back. A transaction in the other 49 states takes place between a buyer and a seller. I want to buy your property. You want to sell it to me? I'll bring you a contract. You sign it. That is not how transactions take place in New York. In New York, they take place between a seller's attorney and a buyer's attorney. So the seller's attorney generates the contract, sends it to the buyer's attorney, and they negotiate. So because of the seller's attorney on almost every single deal, any title issue gets cleared by the seller's attorney. That's his job. Now, he may obviously go back to his client, the seller, and say, hey, this judgment shows up from 1975. Did you pay it off? And do you have any proof you paid it off? Or what can we do? He'll work with the title company also. Let's say he doesn't have it. Title company will say, well, you can file an affidavit. You have to leave some money in escrow. We'll do some research on it and see if it's still there. That's what happens a lot. That happens for judgments or liens. Another example is in a situation where a property was inherited, right? So somebody dies, and then there's a probate process to move that property and all the assets from an estate into the heirs of that estate. But very often there's complications, right? Something was owned by someone who passed away, and then it moved into somebody, and then now it should go into the heirs' estate, but they need proof that that person died, right? It still shows it in the name of John Smith. John Smith died 5 years ago. You need a death certificate. So that's something that the seller's attorney might order. He also might need help of his client. These are very common title issues. Also, sometimes a tax payment will show up that a tax lien will show up that was paid, or a taxes seem to be due, but the seller says they were paid. These are how title gets cleared, right? A transaction takes place with clear title, which means no judgments, liens, encumbrances. Now, what's ironic is that in the other 49 states, it's very common for real estate transaction to take place with liens in place subject to those liens. So, for example, if you buy an auction property in a lot of states, including Florida, you have to run title on it because you're buying it subject to whatever judgments are on the seller. So I buy a property, it looks like a great deal, it's $100,000. I know I can fix it up and sell it for $300,000. But there could be a $200,000 judgment against a seller that I'm now stuck with paying because I now own this property and I didn't clear it off. In New York, and I never realized how amazing this is, one of the most amazing things in New York is that everything is given with clear title. So I bought a lot of properties at auctions for 4 years. I never ran title, I didn't care, because whatever encumbrances, liens, judgments were there, were going to be paid by the seller, by the bank. They had to be. So that was an amazing thing, and something we almost take for granted in New York. We didn't even realize. But how to clear title. So those are the basic kinds of things. Who owns it, and what liens, judgments, encumbrances are on it. So, if you have something showing up on your title, you may have to go through some old paperwork to prove that you paid those things off if they were paid. Otherwise, you may have to call up the lien holder, the judgment holder, and ask them if they can maybe work something out. It's very common for a very old judgment or lien, depending who it is, for them to say, okay, we'll take 50 cents on the dollar, that finally we're going to get paid. We're just happy to get paid. So they'll negotiate with you. It's very possible. So even if there's a judgment for $10,000, sometimes you call them and say, hey, can I give you $5,000 on it? Sometimes they'll go, screw you, there's interest accrued, and now you owe me $20,000. It's really up to them, but very often you can negotiate the judgment. Sometimes it's better if a third party negotiates the judgment and not you. That's a whole another topic for discussion. So I hope this was helpful. If you're interested in other ways I can help you, go to howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're interested in my course that teaches how to do this, go to howtoflipnewyorkcourse.com. Course, COURSE. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching, go to coaching.howtoflipnewyork.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you are watching on any channel, please click the thumbs up. I really appreciate it. All the likes have been helping me. And if you have any comments or any questions about this or any other topic, you can ask. There are no bad comments. I go live 5 times a week, and I very often need those comments to give me topics to discuss because I'll just draw a blank on what to talk about. So there are no bad comments, nothing too simple. If it's a simple answer, I'll just reply with an answer. If it's something that I've covered in depth or very recently, I will send you links to the video. And if it's something new, I'll do a video on it. So thank you very, very, very much for watching.